As the GameStop surge continues to make billionaire hedge funders cry, and we all love that, the establishment has actually begun comparing the wave of anti-Wall Street sentiment to the Capitol riots, which seems like a rather strange thing to tie this entire thing to. So let me give you a couple of examples. This is from USA Today, where, they write, weeks before the mob descended on the Capitol, Trump supporters who refused to, accept the November election results took to social media, Parler, Gab, etc., and did this, plans for the massive protests, right? And then they write, in the same vein, small-pocketed investors use the social media platform Reddit to launch their assault on Wall Street. Notice the language there, and give GameStop's stock price, drive it higher. Reddit users on a forum called Wall Street Bets took matters into their own hands after hedge funds began unloading the struggling retailer's stock through a process known as short selling. One person, Ken Kamen, president of Mercedian Asset Management from New Jersey, made the most direct comparison. He said, if you want to call what happened at the Capitol a mob, you can also call what's happening at GameStop a mob too. How many of the protesters that stormed the Capitol actually thought the FBI would be hunting them down and threatening them with 20-year jail terms? They were just going with the crowd. Everyone was doing it. The GameStop investors have been fallen victim to the same kind of group thinking, Kamen said, without considering or fully understanding that huge, easy profits can just as quickly turn into major financial loss. Quote, who doesn't want to make money when everyone else is making money? But rookie investors make rookie mistakes. In many ways, people are playing with dynamite and they might blow off their fingers. So you have any thoughts on this so far, what they're saying about this? And what do you think they're getting wrong?
Everything. They're getting everything wrong. On one hand, with the Capitol rioters, we're dealing with extreme right-wingers who simply did not like the results of our democratic process, which indicated that Donald Trump lost the election. He was not reelected. And so they decided to violently storm the Capitol, killing 5 people, by the way, in order to overthrow the government and get the person they like in the White House. That's what they did. That is very different from the underlying message by the Reddit users, the subreddit users for Wall Street Bets. What they noticed through their own analysis, whether you buy it or not, that there was this hedge fund, Melvin Capital, shorting a company, GameStop, that I'm sure has a lot of nostalgic value for these people as well, right? They noticed that
for sure.
Of course. I grew up with a lot of these brands. I remember being annoyed because I wasn't really a gamer growing up, but it didn't matter. I remember going to the mall with my little brother, and my brother would insist on going to GameStop. And I remember walking into GameStop and it smelled like a sweaty locker. It was so gross in there. It was always packed. And it was just like, since there were so many people in there, it was always like really like stuffy and it smelled. But anyway, I have fond memories of those days. It reminds me of my childhood. So I know that there's an element of nostalgia to it. And when you look at the other brands that were being shorted by these hedge funds, they're the kinds of brands that we know and love, right? Express Clothing Store, Nokia, like just brands that, we know that they haven't really been doing well. And here's the issue. So we have these retail traders, right? These are the small investors who are on Wall Street Bets, deciding to do something in a collectivist way, which is incredibly impressive.
Ironic,
to help
too.
save these companies. And look, are they going to be able to save these companies for the long haul? Probably not. But the point that I think is important to focus on is that hedge funds being able to short certain companies should be illegal. It should be illegal. There is no value to that. That doesn't add any value or any type of important investment to these companies. What it does, especially when these hedge funds publish their analysis, is it accelerates the demise of these companies. Because what they're signaling to the world is, hey, through our fancy research, we think this company is going to fail. And what do you think happens to other investors? Well, then they start to sell. And it, again, rapidly accelerates the decline of these companies. And then on top of that, you want to talk about market manipulation. Then these hedge fund guys go to CNBC and they do these segments talking and promoting their analysis, which then
Hmm.
further accelerates the rapid decline of these companies. Like, again, shorting stocks, shorting a specific company, there's no value to it. And I think what happened here was you have these retail investors who are like, no, let's band together and let's make these hedge funds pay. And there was
I love
something
it.
real sweet about that. Yeah, I love it too. And, some people have been talking about, and it's a legitimate point. It's
Hmm.
not just the retail investors who made money off of this. There were certainly hedge funds who were privy to what was going on. Robinhood, which is an ironically named brokerage, to be honest
Yep.
with you, uh, has been working with hedge funds, essentially selling the data of its users to the hedge funds. So there were hedge funds like BlackRock, for instance, that made a killing as a result of what went down. But the second point that I want to bring up, and it's an important point,
Hmm.
is the issue of manipulation, because that manipulation has been going on for a very, very, very long time, right? The market is manipulated by the Federal Reserve pumping money into failing companies and banks, which then turn around and do corporate stock buybacks and artificially inflate the values of their
Hmm.
shares. It happens when these massive corporations get these tax cuts, and the tax cuts, of course, are sold to the American people as a way of increasing your wages and creating new jobs. Of course, that never
Ah,
happens. What do the companies do? They turn around, they buy shares of their own stocks, they artificially inflate the value of the shares. That kind of manipulation has been going on forever. And there's never any discussion on CNBC about how wrong that is. But once you have a group of Reddit users taking matters into their own hands and finding a way to outsmart these fancy Wall Street guys, well, then all of a sudden we got a problem. And why don't we go ahead and insult these people by
hmm.
comparing them to extreme right wing Capitol rioters? It's just so pathetic.
100%. Uh, Boy, I need to get that thing that John Landeroli, he says that all the time. You know that. They should just like I should just have like an emoji like he said the thing. I said the thing. I'm sorry, John. I stole your line. That happens all the time. But okay, anyway. But you know, you made a lot of great points. And the thing about this is they don't want us dirty pores getting in their game. And that's the whole problem that they're having. That's why people like Leon Cooperman are crying right now, right? And they're saying,
Mhm.
oh, there are people home with their. You know what? Let me just show you the video. Okay.
The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government, okay? And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people. And, I think it's inappropriate. We all got to work together and pull together.
Yeah, that's Leon crying Cooperman, and so, but again, it's because these redditors have exposed the system for what it is, a giant casino with the rules that are rigged massively in favor of the large hedge funds. And to see a hedge fund brought to its knees to get Melvined is just, I mean, you can't get any better than that.
One of my favorite people on this very topic is Nomi Prinz. She's been on TYT several times before. And I remember Nomi Prinz from the days when I was just a guest booker at TYT. I would book her on the show and this is like in 2007, 2008. I just remember everything that she would say would go right past me. Like I couldn't understand what she was
Mhm.
talking about. But obviously, like I've grown a little and I've learned more about how the markets work. And fairly recently, she wrote a book called Collusion, and it's not about Russia or anything like that. It's about the central banks and
Mhm.
how much they have manipulated the markets. And by the way, not only US stocks, how much they've manipulated the world, right? In propping up certain companies, doing something known as quantitative easing.
Mhm.
This really exploded following the 2008 economic collapse. And it's very clear that much like our two-tiered justice system, we have a two-tiered financial system that has already chosen the winners from the losers. And
Right.
let me tell you something, you and I are not considered the winners. And so
Mhm.
Robinhood playing interference for these hedge funds by restricting investment into these stocks, whether it's GameStop, AMC, Express, basically the stocks that had been shorted by these hedge funds. The fact that Robinhood jumped in to protect these hedge funds, I mean, it shows you that this is not a free market, right? Is this a free
No.
market? A free
No.
market? Really? It seems like there are regulations in place, but the regulations are rigged against ordinary people like us.
Absolutely. And worse, and almost worse than that. Because again, the rules are rigged against us and it's very clear. But then they're also talking down to us as well, as if we're the idiots. I mean, Chris Salissa, let me give you a quote from him. Here's what he wrote. And normally, again, Chris Salissa does some good stuff, but has some pretty dog shit opinions. And so here's what he writes. What's the end game for GameStop surgers, he asks. Like, now that they've proven to the point that they can take a stock that the pros, since apparently they're not pros, have declared moribund and revive it, at least for a moment, what do they do now? Because I don't really believe that GameStop is... I'm sorry, whenever I read one of these people, I get into the rich person voice. Oh, I do declare. That GameStop is suddenly the new Amazon or Apple or Google. It's still mostly just a business that derives its value from brick and mortar stores and malls, which again is not exactly a big growth area in coming years. No, look, that's a perfectly substantive point. Definitely, right? But here's the thing. He says, the point is that there's no real point.
Though?
He does not.
That's the thing, though. Like, they don't ever scratch beneath the surface, and I think that's a problem. Why is GameStop suffering, right? I mean, we have monopolies like Amazon, it's just, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for one, maybe because it smells like gym socks and feet and is sweaty.
But I love it. It's America. It's America, Jeff.
It smells like America.
I want the ability. I don't have children, but I think about my nieces a lot, actually. Like, what are my nieces' teenage years going to be like? Are they just going to be home or at school all day? Are they just going to be behind a computer zooming in with their friends? Like, think about all of these gathering places. I mean, I know that it also feeds into consumerism, but put that aside for a minute. Going to the mall wasn't just about going to the mall and shopping. Like, it was about meeting up with your friends after school, having a good time. And that connection, that person-to-person connection is really like deteriorating right now as everything. I mean, obviously during the pandemic, everything has moved online. But even after the pandemic, just think about how isolated people are becoming, how atomized things are becoming, people are becoming. And I want the ability to go to a brick and mortar store. I want the ability to, and I don't want all of these massive malls to turn into warehouses for Amazon. I mean, it's like this dystopian, future that we're looking at straight on, and it's terrifying. So I would much rather be in a smelly GameStop than
me too.
Look at a mall that's been converted into an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah, I mean, look, I used to go. That was my childhood. Maybe a little too close. Hits a little too close to home, Anna. I'm just saying. I smell a lot better now, but anyway. But yeah, you're absolutely right in the fact that, I mean, these stores have not been doing good before the pandemic because of the switch to all online. And as somebody who is a hardcore gamer, I sometimes like to even go into the GameStop just to go and browse the games that they have. Even though I know I could sit home and download these games and probably get a better deal. I mean, look, I've done reports on GameStop before. They do have some pretty terrible business practices, terrible labor practices, and that's a result of their financial situation and, of course, capitalism in general. But at the same time, you're right that it brings us back to that nostalgia, and they are important places to be able to have some human interaction in a world that generally, even again after the pandemic, is not as exactly conducive to that anymore. And so really important. But let me finish this quote here from Salissa. He says, the point is that there's no real point beyond showing up the pros, proving to them that they aren't as smart as they think they are and they don't have the ability to control anything, which again has its roots in Trumpism. That strategy, if it's even a word, can be associated with what this is, has massive limits. Sticking it to the man will only get you so far. It's not a solution to any problem. It's just a way to express frustration, anger, and a feeling of helplessness. Think of it this way. Giving someone the finger might make you feel good in the moment, but it doesn't solve anything. I don't know about you, Anna, but I really do love giving hedge funds the finger because they have done so many times. The 2007-2008 financial crisis that wiped out so many millions of families, for example, while greedy, stockholders and short sellers have been, drinking champagne on their now many yachts. And so I kind of feel like giving them the finger, or maybe even the guillotine, eat the rich.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, the day that Occupy Wall Street protesters were being forced out of Zuccotti Park, there were Wall Street, people working in Wall Street, essentially watching it happen, laughing and mocking the protesters. So
it's better. It's better. Let me just add in this real quick. They were dumping job applications on them for outside the windows. You remember?
I do. And so when Chris Cillizza brings up the, oh, they're doing this because of like anger and they feel hopeless. And you hit the nail on the head. It's because the so-called pros, our politicians, people in positions of power who have promised to represent our best interests, have done the exact opposite. And they've only helped to make this rigged system more robust in favor of people who are already powerful and privileged. And so, his tone there actually reminds me a lot of, my personal experience working at TYT. And like, I have the benefit of having been there for 14 years and seeing, just how how mainstream media treated us. And by the way, it still continues to treat us. But in 2007, 2008, 2010, for years, the idea of new media serving as any type of competition for legacy media outlets was laughable. They thought we were a joke. And I remember like around 2012 was when Cenk started getting contacted by some of these legacy media outlets because they wanted advice on how to digitize some of their content. And they had no choice really but to adapt with something that was changing. And I don't know if this is a sign of something changing within our financial system, but I'm excited about it. Because what this has done for a lot of people, a lot of young people who lean left don't know much about how the market works. Like they don't know much about like how the stock market is manipulated. And now for the first time, it's just become very crystal clear to them. And I think that this kind of knowledge is important, right? Because it's all a game. It's all a game. And the winning party is not the party that we're invited to, we're not part of. And so when we get pointed at and when Wall Street Bets gets accused of manipulating the market, I mean, that's a rich accusation considering the manipulation that's been going on. And for anyone who like Josh Barro, who he's definitely one of these centrist guys. And he like earnestly put out some tweets about how wrong this is. And, the market it's important. This is going to discourage people from investing in these companies that are trying to do the right. I don't know, just all this, like, it came from an earnest place. But being able to short companies, there's no value to that. There's no benefit to that. It makes it clear that this is just it's a casino. This is all about gambling. It's glorified gambling. And it's even worse than what you experience in a casino because it's even more rigged than playing penny slots. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Because if
Absolutely.
you're playing penny slots and you hit the jackpot, you win $1,000,
Hmm.
you don't have like a casino worker show up and say, "No, actually, no, we're going to change the rules," and it turns out that you didn't win $1,000. But
Right.
that's what they're trying to do right now with Robinhood and TD Ameritrade and all these other brokerage firms, preventing people from being able to buy shares that they want to buy.
Right. And really, I see that as a result of the democratization to kind of bring it back to the media angle and new media angle, because I think that there's a lot of, you can find a lot of parallel. The fact that the news has now been democratized away from some of these larger outlets, the larger, more established outlets, as well as now these apps that were allowing the democratization of day trading and stocks and, buying and selling stocks in general is something that they don't like. They hate this because they feel that their power and their monopoly over this is kind of slipping away as more and more people get not only educated in this, but also become more proficient in this and start to make money outside of the traditional lanes of capitalism. And so I think
Hmm.
this is definitely a reaction to this, shutting down those trades. And now you've got people that were on Robinhood that are doing a class action lawsuit against the company for not. They were, I'm sure you've probably seen this as well, that they were selling people's shares without their consent
Yep.
to force
Yep.
people to sell, and again, not allowing for you to buy, but only allowing you to trade in one way in order to help out their friends, the hedge funders. And it really is super disgusting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And one other thing that I'll point out, you know, I don't want anyone to mistake my commentary on this as saying that I want more involvement in the stock market. I think that the stock market first of all, buying individual stocks is a dangerous thing to do. It's very risky. And so I don't want anyone to be persuaded by what they're seeing in
Mhm.
the news right now to engage in this because it is risky and it is dangerous. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money. And I would hate to see that.
Let me ask you
For
something though.
me, go ahead, sure.
I just wanted to ask you, like, how much more risky is it than actually end up having your 401ks in these stocks as well? Because again,
Yeah.
there are no retirement plans for workers anymore. It is all tied up in the stock market, and I think that's just a general failing of the system. But sorry, go ahead.
Yes. No, you bring up such a great point. Because in the 1970s, there was this shift in our financial system away from encouraging Americans to save their money, like save their money in a savings account that'll pay you a
Hmm.
decent interest rate. We moved away from that to a finance based system where everyone's encouraged to take debt out, like debt, right? Low interest, take out a
Yep.
loan, take out some debt. And so Americans are drowning in debt. Consumer debt in America is far higher today than it was at the height of the 2008 economic collapse. It is a
Yep.
disaster. Okay. And so if you are, let's say you're someone who's actually terrified about finances as I've been because I
Hmm.
grew up with immigrant parents. And so they really drilled in my head that you have to be frugal, you have to save, you have to be careful. And I'm really grateful that I got that education. But my parents have never invested in the stock market because they didn't trust it. And so I never received any real like formal education or education from my parents about investing.
Right.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I really started to immerse myself into this stuff because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to learn it. And so, if you are fortunate enough to work at a company that offers a 401k and you're investing in it, please make sure that you're invested in mutual funds that minimizes the risk. That's different from being invested in individual stocks, right? Because when you're invested in an individual stock, like let's say GameStop, for instance, if GameStop fails, if it goes bankrupt, you're screwed. Like the shares you own in that company are, you're in trouble. But with
Hmm.
mutual funds, they're set up in a way that diversifies the risk and you're better off. I mean, it'll fluctuate, it'll go up and down. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor,
Hmm.
so please seek advice from an actual fiduciary expert. But that is the best way to minimize your risk. So that's, you know, the advice that I feel comfortable giving you guys. But really, in an ideal world, you would have the ability to save for retirement in a way that is not tied to risk. That is
Right.
not tied to risk. In an ideal world, there would be an incentive for you to put your money in a savings account that pays you a decent interest rate. Because here's what happens when the Federal Reserve pumps interest-free money into these banks. Banks don't need your deposits anymore. And so since they don't need your deposits anymore, they don't need to pay you an interest rate for depositing your money in their banks. And so the Federal Reserve screws us in so many ways. And I think average people are finally waking up to it. It's been such a disastrous way of trying to save our financial system. All it did was save Wall Street, but it screwed everyone else over.
True. And to get back to a point about, you know, risk, you said that if GameStop goes bankrupt, very likely that they probably will. That's why there were so many short sales on it. And whatever happens, you know, when people have to, whether they unload this stock or not, which would drive the price back down, there is always somebody waiting in the wings, an investment firm or a vulture capital firm, for example. Bain Capital is the one I always tend to go back to, that makes money by stripping these companies apart. First they acquire it using, you know, loads of debt. And after the company is loaded with that debt, and then they unload more more debt from buying that company to the company, and then they strip it apart, fire everybody, and, you know, everybody's left without jobs. But the people who do this make a ton of money.
They do.
They make a killing. And so,
you know what they do with the debt that they take out? Not only do they take out a massive amount of debt and over leverage the company, but they use that debt to pay the executives insane salaries. Insane. Yeah.
And so
it's just so infuriating.
It is. And that is the way the system is set up, rigged against us to benefit the wealthy financiers. And so again, to go back to kind of tie everything together, I'm really happy to see a bunch of Redditors, you know, actually go and flip the bird at these hedge funds and drive them out of business. I think the total is about $70 billion in losses across all of Wall Street as a result of this. And I just sorry, not sorry. I bathe in billionaire tears. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.